As destination organizations, throughout the pandemic, we forged new and direct relationships with our communities, our citizens, our local businesses, small, medium, and large. It would be sad to see that brilliant network fade post-pandemic. So the question looms, what will we do to maintain, nurture, and grow those essential interconnections? One thing for sure, doing things the way they've always been done isn't an option. We need new models, new tools, and most importantly, we need to craft a new, inspired vision for our destinations that is shared by the stakeholder and the traveler alike. We need to act. We need to act decisively, and we need to do it now. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Frank Cuypers is the Senior Strategic Consultant for Destination Think. He is a tourism strategist for the World Bank in Malawi and a visiting professor in Innsbruck, New York, and Antwerp. Kristin Dunne is the Chief Executive for the Bay of Plenty region on New Zealand's North Island. And together, they worked on the Bay of Plenty's plan for regenerative tourism. As Kristin so eloquently puts it, regenerative tourism goes beyond just reducing one's footprint and doing less harm. It's about leaving our place better than we found it. Put simply, it's about ensuring destinations are loved by visitors, but not loved to death. Ultimately, she says, we want tourism to be a force for good, and that means ensuring that all the people who live here are happy with the type and number of visitors that we share our home with. This is our place, and we want to see it protected for future generations. Good morning, Kristin. How are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Morena, David. I am in New Zealand, obviously, in Te Moana Nui Atoi, which is the coastal Bay of Plenty, and you can see how beautiful it is in the picture behind you. I'm really excited actually because I'm today at one of our educational institutes, and we're launching Flavors of Plenty, which is one of our new community-led initiatives.
Well, great. It's great to have you here. Good morning, Frank Cuypers. Oh, sorry. Good night, evening in Antwerp, Frank Cuypers. How are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Thank you, David. I'm, as you say, in Antwerp in Belgium. That's in the north. So my mother tongue is Flemish, as you can hear. I'm bilingual, speak French as well. Very helpful when you work in Canada. And yeah, it's 11 in almost night time here. So I have a large pot of coffee besides me.
Well, good afternoon from Toronto, Canada, and thanks for picking such an appropriate time for me. Totally appreciate it. Kristin, in a recent blog post on the Bay of Plenty Regenerative Tourism Initiative, you wrote this: created collaboratively with locals, the strategy puts the onus on the community to become gatekeepers and protectors of our destination. It creates a tourism model that works within our local environment and cultural heritage rather than against it. I love that. I mean, as we struggle now to not just demonstrate, but to continually improve our relevance in our destinations, you often wonder as a destination management executive, where do you start? And I think the ultimate expression of alignment is a plan that's actually collaboratively created with locals. So let's talk about the Bay of Plenty Regenerative Tourism project. You both worked on it together. Take me from sort of the inception through a bit of a high overview, and then we'll get into some of the details. Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll start. So when I came into this role in 2016, our organisation was really struggling with relevance. We didn't know what our purpose was and what benefit we were adding to the community. So we went through a long stakeholder process to try and find out who we are and what value we could add as an organisation. And that led us onto this journey of finding out who we are as a place and who we are as a people. And that was a journey that we went on with Frank and the team at Destination Think. And we're being really fortunate to work with their strategic skill and now being able to implement our plan, which is called Te Hā Te Poi, the love of tourism. But just before I hand over to Frank, I do want to say that a lot of what we have written into our plan is actually the wisdom of our elders and our past. So I think if you're wondering where to start, then start with your past. And what we've really tried to communicate or articulate is Indigenous wisdom, and bring that Indigenous wisdom through as innate thinking into this modern destination management plan.
Cool. Frank, Bay of Plenty puts out an RFP. You are sitting half a world away. You read it. Tell me about that. What did the RFP say, and where did your thinking go?
I can't even recollect whether there was an RFP. I remember very well I was working in Tasmania, and the company I work with is Canadian. It's Destination Thinking. They called me and they say Bay of Plenty is next. We are, and this is absolutely not coming from an arrogant position, but we become very picky about clients because in Dutch we have an expression, there is no use of pulling a dead horse. So we really are looking for clients that have a long-term vision because we think it's the only right vision for tourism. And when I arrived in Bay of Plenty, we talked immediately about the right things. So what really triggered me is regenerative tourism. Now, a lot of destinations over the planet, they know exactly, okay, we were the promotion gun of our destination. Then we moved in destination management. What is the difference between destination management and regenerative tourism? It's your starting point. The angle is different. So the angle that Kristin took immediately is, I want to do good. I want to have a community that benefits from what I do. I want to have a thriving or flourishing community. So it's a very positive angle. Destination management is more, we have a problem, we need to fix it. There is over tourism, we need to fix it. So that's the big difference. And that's what I really liked.
So when I hear that, I go back pre-pandemic and say most destination organizations in the world will say, no, that was our mandate. We wanted to do good. We wanted to see things flourish. We wanted to be relevant and connected. There's no question in the pandemic, that became a word that you like to use, Frank, lip service. There's a lot of lip service going on around engagement and relevance. Kristin, what was different? I mean, you couch it in terms that can easily be perverted into say, yeah, we're already doing that. What was different this time?
Well, we were very authentic about our desire to do good. That was what was in my heart and my mind, and it was what came from our community. So we got to a human truth as part of the consultation process that we went through with Frank and the team, which was love of place and the desire to see it protected for future generations was at the heart of our community. That's what they wanted from us, and that's what they wanted from tourism. And that meant more to them than GDP or the economy or, heads on beds and all that type of thing. So we were united in this view that we loved our place. We wanted to see it protected for future generations. And it sounds really simple, but if that's the place where you're starting from, then you're going to do good things. And if you hold that as your kind of North Star or South Star, as we do.
So, Frank, love of place, I hear it in Kristin's message, but I also hear it in the thing that informed her message. So I believe, you live in a place that's got a loving core to it. People love to be there. Again, that existed pre-regenerative tourism initiative. Frank, what was your encounter there? Like, I mean, obviously it's a place where the people feel very strongly about it. They have a very deep connection to the land. They go back, generations and generations. I see that, but how do you, Frank, how do you begin to take that and align it? You take something delicate and try and line it up in a way that actually becomes a productive part of the tourism schema.
Well, the starting point is always the same. You need to gain trust. You need to build confidence with your communities. And a lot of clients are afraid of being confronted with residents, right? And then I explain, this is about ownership. Who owns the name of a place is the people that live there. There is an enhanced sensibility in New Zealand because they have a sort of co-stewardship system. Together with the Maori, the indigenous population, to take care of the land. So there is a higher attention to that ownership thing, right? You don't own land in New Zealand, you take care of land, there is stewardship. And that's really in their DNA. So the holistic thinking comes actually from the past, it's their legacy. So that's why we could install, and that was an idea of Kristin, to install the 7 generations principle. That is something that a lot of indigenous people, also in Canada, David, have in common. You need everything you need to do should be beneficiary for the next 7 generations. So the beginning is facing the residents, not being afraid, being open, being honest. Don't say I have the solutions. And then the last thing I want to say about is it's not enough to bring them together in a room and co-create stuff. You need to go back. You need to give feedback. You need to keep them in the loop. And then they are going to see you are very serious about this.
Frank, I've worked with you at the first stage of that, facing the residents in a different project in Canada. And it's never easy. Facing the residents, again, as Kristin, as you said, it sounds easy, but the first time, Kristin, you were standing there looking at your first general resident stakeholder meeting, moving forward with the idea that a love of this place was going to help you champion what was right and what needed to happen. That must have been a weird experience.
Well, it was even worse, David, because I was also asking for their rates that they pay each year to go up in order to implement this way of thinking. But I went to a lot of community groups and presented this notion that we needed to have someone who would be kaitiaki or steward for this place. And if it wasn't our organisation, I couldn't see another organisation that would be. So when you connect with people about their love of place and wanting to see it protected, actually there was real magic in that. And we got to 48.5% in public consultation of residents saying, yes, we want to give more money to this organisation in order to help them be this protector of our place.
All right. Frank, did you actually get to be on the ground in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to fly over there, and I know what your next question is going to be.
Yep.
Just let me come back to Stratford, Ontario, where we worked together 5 years ago, David. It was one of my first attempts to do that. What I actually did is bringing the idea of place making, Jane Jacobs, you should co-create with your residents. I brought that to destination marketing. And I remember very well that we were both a bit not very excited about the engagement in one focus group we had together. And we did it again. And you brought in even a musician, a bagpipe player. And yep. We built a whole entertainment part in it so that people could come together, actually celebrating the community. And it worked wonderfully in Stratford. And that is something that Kristin has been doing long before we arrived, trying to bridge to people and building that bridge. DMO isn't a promotion machine anymore. It's really a sort of network organization, a spider in a web, as I call it.
Well, that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about the engagement piece in Stratford, and obviously Bay of Plenty being linked, but of course they are. In Stratford, our job was to engage and inspire a network that hopefully would have an enduring life well beyond. Pretty business-like terms, Kristin, for something that I think you've said much more eloquently in terms of human terms. But tell me about, I gotta ask out of fascination, because I remember the meetings Frank's talking about in Stratford, the first sort of 30 people in a room and the second sort of 60 people in a room, and the building of momentum. What was the first meeting like when you say to a whole bunch of people, which is, we're going to build an entire new tourism schema based on how much we love this place? Tell me about that first meeting.
Oh, I'd love to be able to give you a fascinating story there, but actually, because the truth came from the community, when you put it back to them in a PowerPoint deck or in a presentation, everyone's like, oh, right, yeah. I mean, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. This was very much strategy in retrospect. Every day we're kind of saying, oh yeah, we did that, but we didn't know what the pathway was going to look like. So actually the hardest thing that I found is being able to find the language to explain what is a really complex area to people. And of course, everyone wants a roadmap and they want results, especially, funders, but we're building the road as we go. So it's quite hard to communicate that strategy when you know that every year, actually, you're innovating, you're learning, you're trying stuff, and some stuff's going to work and some stuff's going to fail, and then you move for what was working well. And articulation becomes difficult.
It does. And the early metrics that you inherit have to do with how much the funders are putting in and what's the yield and things like that. How long did it take you to move out of that orbit into something else? Where it sounds like today the discussion you have with your funders isn't, can I see the ROI on my input in terms of, beds. It sounds like you're beyond that now.
No, and sadly we're not. So it is still one of our challenges. And I think people look in from the outside and it's a bit different on the inside. It's still absolutely a challenge to build the coalition of the willing. And also, I think as Frank was saying earlier, post-COVID, there's been a bit of a panic and people are wanting to revert back to the way things were. And some stakeholders are wanting to be, very strongly back in growth mode, and others can see that no, we need to stay the course and continue to go forward with our longer term vision. So that stakeholder piece, over 50, maybe 60% of my time has just been trying to help keep a coalition together on this journey.
It's difficult times in the sense you can market as loud and hard as you want. The restricting factor is not awareness or a desire to travel.
And our whole view of marketing has completely changed due to the work that we did with Frank and the team. They introduced us to DNA, where we defined who we truly were, and that has been absolutely just gold for us. I can't tell you how valuable that piece of work was. And so we develop based on that DNA, we promote based on that DNA, we use passionography, another great Destination Think product. I'm not here to just sort of promote Destination Think, but they've been brilliant. So how we talk to our potential visitors is entirely different as well. And actually what we're trying to do is bring our resident who's passionate about a part of our DNA and a visitor who's passionate about that same thing together and converse. And that's what we're launching here today in the Bay of Plenty, which is really cool.
So let's come back to what you're launching here today. I want to talk about DNA. Frank, you're like that nephew of a friend of mine when I see him when he's in high school, and then 8 years later he's graduated university. I forget that there's 5 years, 6 years in between when we did Stratford. We were just beginning to toy with the idea of DNA as the central tenet of alignment in a destination. Tell me about the DNA work in Bay of Plenty, Frank.
Yeah, so DNA, and it's often misunderstood, and I needed to come up with a word in the beginning, but everything becomes sensitive in the English language these days, but it's actually your self-identity. So what are your residents talk about when they talk about their place? And that's what we were doing in Stratford. So what are really the assets and what are the attributes that people from Stratford really care about? Now, 4 years later, we arrived in Bay of Plenty, and then it really has evolved in something more sophisticated. So what we do now is not only trying to get a grasp on that identity of a place together with your residents, but we're also going to compare it. What is the world saying about your place? What kind of assets and attributes do they see in your place? And what are you telling to the world? And these three things, what you're telling to the world, what the world is saying about you, and what you are saying about yourself, the more they fall together, the stronger your reputation is, because then you walk your talk. You deliver on promise. But if there is a big gap between what the world sees in you, like, hey, you say you're green, but that's not our experience, or you are promoting constantly destination X or Y, but the world overlooks this, then you need to work on this narrative gap. So it's really stories that we investigate and looking for narrative gaps. From these narrative gaps, you know what you need to work on in your destination development and in your communication. That's in a nutshell the philosophy.
When you talk about those narrative gaps, and we went on to work on the Stratford file and really reach this point where we decided that the redefinition of a destination brand as the sum total of all shared stories and experiences through all media constituted your destination brand. That was a big moment for us, because it meant that exactly what you said, the internals had their stories that were so important to them, the externals had theirs, and between them you had a brand. The question was it accurate? Did it reflect the DNA? Did it reflect the values of place? If anything, all of that's become incredibly more important in COVID as we realized, places that were facing over tourism pressures have realized they don't have to go back there. We speak often of Barcelona and Venice in that sense. And you were ahead of the curve, Kristin, pre-COVID on the idea of relevance and tourism serving stakeholders, but there's a pressing need around the world for that now. We're not going back to the high yield, shuffle them through as fast as we can. I know, Frank, you worry about it. So do I. I don't see how we can go back there and at the same time have tourism organizations remain what they are. They can't be relevant in that model for much, much longer.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what makes a difference right now is measurement. So if people speak about economics, if people speak about growth, they only measure what comes in my destination, right? What comes in my hotel, what comes in my airline, what is the revenue? And I think the more sophisticated destinations really shift from as many visitors as possible, as high yield, big spend, and so on, and longer stay. What we never calculate is what economists call internalized cost or hidden cost. What is the cost for the authorities to clean up your beaches, to pick up the litter, damage on heritage, grumpy people in your community that start pushing back, congestion of roads, congestion of parking lots, all that has a price as well. And the price is called quality of life. So if we can make that visible, then you can talk about real value for a destination, even expressed in dollar signs or euro signs.
So, Kristin, were those pressures that Frank talks about, pressures on the natural environment, pressures on garbage, pressures on healthcare, et cetera, were those part of the thinking, pre regenerative strategy? Did you have those pressures? Was it an over tourism situation? What was the precipitating environment?
So we weren't one of New Zealand's hotspots. We weren't really suffering from it, but we had pockets of it. And just looking what was happening around the country and around the world, we knew that if we kept promoting ourselves, then we were going to become, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because we would soon become a hotspot. And
Sure.
So how do we set a plan that meant that we could help to have some kind of balance to that and help the community voice be as strong as the industry voice, or the voice of the land be as strong as economic growth? And it's finding that kind of balance and taking, in New Zealand, we call it a full well-beings approach. And it's something that our government promotes as well, which is to look at economy, of course, but also socially, what would that decision mean? Culturally, what does it mean? And environmentally, what does it mean? And trying to balance those factors together.
Pre-strategy, you have a stakeholder engagement model. Everybody does, and every DMO I talk to will tell me, yes, we have a stakeholder engagement model. Some are deeper than others, some aren't. What's the difference between who's included in that now versus before?
Oh, it's incredibly different. Ours was very narrow, quite industry-led. We didn't have good engagement with our iwi, our hapu, our Indigenous people. We used to say about our community, oh, we can't spend money talking to them because they're not our audience. All our money needs to be spent attracting people here. And so we have a whole, a quarter of what we do goes into our community and working with them. And, Frank taught me something. He taught me a lot of things, but one thing that has really stuck with me is this is not our place to share. This is our community's home. It's their place to share, and they'll only do so willingly if they feel like it's being shared in the right way. And that has never left me, that notion that it's not my place to do this. I have to do this in coalition with the people of this place, whomever they may be. So now our stakeholder engagement list, we have a partnerships manager just to help manage all of those engagements. We've put in a CRM system to sophisticate the whole thing, and we've got everything from environmentalists to historians to academics so much more rich a flavour of people that we're now liaising with.
So organizationally, significant changes and significant changes of allocation of budget.
Oh, significant, yeah.
Yeah. So, and in that budget, I'm assuming, you know, in the last decade, the bulk of monies that were procured from tourism taxes, bed taxes, et cetera, were expected to go to marketing campaigns, more specifically in the form of buying media. That would have been the old model, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Just promote.
And that did change, and your stakeholders, and I don't blame any of them for this because they put money in, they like to see the name of their properties advertised. The real question came down to, was it effective and sustainable? And that's where maybe we kidded ourselves for a decade as to how effective it was. Frank, what was your reflection on some of the more difficult points of making that transition with with an engaged stakeholder group? What was hard?
Oh, there are so many things I can tell there. I think what really is going to decide the success of a strategy is the ability of the person who leads the DMO. And I think the first time in my life I really was challenged. Well, there were different fantastic encounters, but Kristin Dunne of Bay of Plenty really pushed me and my team a little bit further than we normally do, because we know we take a client by the hand from the definitions they use. It's not like pointing the finger. No, it should be regenerative. No, you take them from the definition, and then you try to be tactical, work your way around to convince the board, to convince the residents. But she was challenging on us of not giving in and be strategically pure. And that is absolutely very brave. I think what I remember very well of working Bay of Plenty, and that was a lesson for my life, is Kristin is very well aligned with the Maori community. And there was a little bit of red flags and fear that we had to go to Whakatane, which is an awesome place, but probably the place in the Bay with the highest concentration of Maori people. So we had a workshop with a lot of indigenous people, but she knows Chief Billy Stewart very well. So he started that workshop by saying, hey, what these guys are coming to do is storytelling. Now, what are we Maori population good in? Stories. It's stories that matters for us. It's story that matters for them. So by that stand-up speech, it was an absolutely success. Everybody spoke up. One of the best workshops I ever did. Now, imagine she had not that connection, and they frame you in that lingo of marketing and branding, and
Yep.
it would have been a total disaster, right? So these are the things you learn along the road.
So speaking to what Frank said about using the right terminology to move and inspire that stakeholder group, Kristin, you have another example of where you really had to think about how you framed things and talked about things in order to get the engagement or to break through the static or the history or the clutter that was there?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, David, probably every engagement, and still needs to be really thoughtfully prepared for, to try and find what's their motivation here. What are they receiving from this work? And I guess I will talk now about what we're launching today, Flavors of Plenty.
Please.
So horticultural provenance was one of the pieces of the DNA that was identified through the DNA process. And we're an incredible food producer, but it's not something that you really get to tangibly see when you visit here. And so Frank really encouraged us to take the DNA elements and give it ownership. So appoint an owner, but not your traditional kind of, marketing person that you might hire into your DMO. Find someone in the community who is really passionate about it and let them lead it. And so we did. We found this amazing woman, Stacey Jones, and when she went out to her connections and said, hey, I'm working on this food project. We're going to really create a brand for food in the Bay of Plenty. Want to do it with me? People were like, hell yes. So this is people from restaurateurs to kiwi fruit growers to Zespri, who's one of our biggest exporters. They came together. We gave them a little bit of money and said, create a plan to how we can be an incredible food destination and take the provenance that we have here and deliver it onto the plates of the people who visit us. and everything in between. And so they did. They created a marketing plan, and it launches here today. So it's been community-driven, community-led, and that passion of those people, it totally shows in the execution of what we've now got. And also, you know, I said to them, this must tell the traditional food story as well. It must reflect our heritage, our history, our culture. And, you know, I wish I could show you that the branding and the communication style and the storytelling is just a beautiful thing to see. And then Frank also, a couple of years ago, he said to me, in your structure of people, you're going to need to hire DNA people at some point. And that is what the organisation will hopefully go on and do this next financial year, is have an internal person who is trying to drive the development and the storytelling of each piece of the DNA, working from these community created plans.
Will you actually do me a favor and put the word DNA in their title? Because that would be the greatest thing ever. I had someone the other day say to me, a futurist tourism advisor. That job didn't exist 10 years ago. Okay, DNA specialist, destination DNA specialist. I love it. Frank, as you're looking at DNA, as you're looking at engagement, I know Think, and I know the modus operandi and the models you employ. You're also looking at distributed storytelling. You're very much looking at when story becomes authentic, then it gets told by the person who tells it, not by someone else. I don't take an authentic story and make it mine. I don't co-opt it. So what kind of progress, Frank, did you see, or how did you spur progress on the idea of distributed storytelling and empowering people to use all the myriad of channels that we have now that have replaced the sort of mono-focused channels we used to have?
Yeah, that's a very good story. We worked with Destination Think for my old employer, Flanders, Visit Flanders, and we curated a Facebook community, not that big, I think 100,000 people, but it was totally dedicated on World War I. Mm-hmm. And I remember that we needed a person that full-time was dedicated to only the content of that Facebook, and spend almost a day to craft that one post that really was engaging the people of that community, a very passionate community. Another thing that I learned is we learn these things in the marketing schools and at universities, like the span of attention is 6 seconds and then they click away. They experimented with a documentary of the BBC, the Flemish television that was broadcast by the BBC. And what you see is that 50% clicked away after 7 seconds, but 50% kept viewing that, and it was a 1-hour documentary on a Facebook. So we need to relearn what meaningful content means. We need to relearn who is going to tell a story. And that's the last thing I want to say. You know that, David, because we spoke about it already. The DMO is not a storyteller. The DMO is the enabler of stories. I work with a lot of clients in the USA, and they really are now looking for in connection with BIPOC people and communities. New York just launched their Black History Month website, and they let the Black community tell their stories, and the website is through their eyes. And then they develop product around it and guided tours in the Bronx and Brooklyn and so on. So that is the new approach of storytelling these days.
Okay, I think we're running down on time here. So why don't we go to this? I know you both wanted to share personally. What if you give me one element or word of caution, Kristin, and then give me one word of encouragement? Remember, you're sharing this with your peers around the world who are in literally the same situation at the same time. We're all there looking to be more relevant, more integrated, more enmeshed with our communities. Give us a word of caution from what you've learned, and give us some encouragement.
So the encouragement is be brave, and the pathway will develop in front of you. Not everyone's going to like it, and not everyone's going to agree. And you will spend your days defending what you're trying to do. So it's exhausting. But I think now, post-COVID, we're with you. You know, so many are with you, and people want to go in this direction. They're just not sure how to get there. Over the last few years at the Bay of Plenty, we put some stepping stones down, and they worked, and they will continue to work into the future. So I'm really, you know, excited to see where it goes into the next sort of, you know, decade time span, because this is a long-term journey. It's not a short-term thing. So if you cannot think short-term and you start thinking long-term, that's a big key to the success. And I guess bringing together the people who also love your place and want to see it protected for future generations, and let them be part of the plan. I think that's a real key to success too, because I guess my caution is, and what I've learned is, this is systemic change. And it's not something that my organisation can do on their own. It has to come from the place, and it has to be a change that's created, you know, beyond just my organisation. It has to be at a destination level. And I think that's where we start to get into placemaking, placekeeping, sort of place storytelling, and it gets outside of the remit of our kind of traditional organisation. So it does need to be systemic, and the thought leadership that's required, the change of mindset has to happen at every level of that place, from the governors, the, you know, central government and local government, right through. And, you know, that can be difficult to do on your own. So I really, my hope is, you know, post-COVID and now seeing all of the thought leadership really everywhere about these type of concepts, is that we can come together as practitioners and learn from each other, and really, you know, help move each other forward. That would be my greatest hope.
Thanks for that, Kristin. Frank, a word of encouragement, a word of caution, both. What do you have to say?
Let's start with a word of caution. It's unfair. I could think Kristin had to respond immediately. The word of caution is, if you keep your definition of tourism narrow, you will have to do more and more with narrow-minded people. If you keep it broad, you will have broad-minded people. This means hard work, but the definition, the value of tourism is that it's an intersection of culture, heritage, food, accommodation, transport, last but not least, your residents. That's also a word of caution. Don't overlook your residents. I had successes because we have engaged residents. Politicians need to relate to something residents see in tourism, whether they like it or not. And your strategy will not end somewhere at a desk or in a drawer of whatever civil servant you have. The word of encouragement is, the future is only for people who go into regenerative tourism and try these new ways. How do I know that for sure? Read your research report. Nielsen, one of the most famous American researchers, says that the Gen Zers, those who are now in their 20s, meaningful choices, that is the number one. Sustainability, it's blowing up now. So they still want to travel. Travel is a good thing, right? It opens your mind and the mind of your children, but there is a big feeling of guilt and shame, and they want to do good. If you can explain them why is it good to travel to your place and how they can be part of your local community, and it's like in Denmark, they say, treat your visitors as temporary locals, right? And then I think you really have the futures. So don't call them consumers anymore, because they will consume your place, but start to treating them like in the old days, like your guests, and they will treat you like hosts.
Well, guys, from Brussels to Bay of Plenty, it's been fantastic. Last word to you, Kristin. What are you most looking forward to this? I guess this is winter for you. This winter in the Bay of Plenty.
Oh, there's so much exciting things going on, but, you know, just for today, launching this new food story that's very much telling the story of our Indigenous past and the cultivation. We're the Bay of Plenty, we're called that because of all of the amazing moana that we have and the treasures within our sea and in our fertile lands. And so it's really exciting because it's so much who we are, and the world doesn't know that yet. And
what's an moana?
Oh, moana is the sea.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, moana is the sea. So fertile lands and open seas that produce so much. And when we can continue to welcome back our manahuri others, our story is going to be so much richer and so much more authentic because of the work that we've done with Frank and the team, and because of the work of my team, who are incredible and extraordinary and brave, and they come up against it every day. So big shout out to the Bay of Plenty team.
Well, listen, big shout out to both of you. The work you're doing is tremendously important and leading. It's always fascinating to talk with you, Mr. Cuypers. As you know, Kristin, I'm so glad we got a chance to meet. We can circle back on this in a few months, but thanks a lot for being here. Really look forward to talking to you again, and have a great day in your case, Kristin. Have a good sleep, Frank, in your case. And thanks again.
Thank you so much, David. Bye.
Thanks, David.